Some cars were never meant for the road. They were experiments, daydreams, or mistakes dressed in chrome and ambition. In the golden age of automotive design, when engineers wielded torches instead of algorithms and coach builders shaped metal by hand, the line between genius and madness was just one sheet of aluminum thick. These weren't vehicles born from focus groups or market research. They were rolling manifestations of pure imagination, built by heirs, priests, airplane designers, and corporate dreamers who believed the future should look nothing like the past. Between the 1930s and 1960s, before computers could predict aerodynamics or safety regulations could tame creativity, a special breed of vehicle emerged. These were the one-off prototypes, the bizarre vintage vehicles that defied every convention. Some featured bubble canopies borrowed from fighter jets. Others used materials so exotic they couldn't be welded, only riveted together like aircraft fuselages. A few ran on turbine engines that screamed like banshees. Many never saw production, killed by economics, impracticality, or sheer strangeness. But every single one proved that imagination could outdrive reason. They represented moments when someone looked at the automobile, already a miracle of engineering, and asked, "What if we made it weirder?" The answers ranged from streamlined eggs to three-wheel promises, from cars that became superheroes to sculptures that happened to have engines. These strange old cars pushed boundaries, broke rules, and sometimes never should have existed. Yet they did. And decades later, whether preserved in museums or lost to history, they still possess an otherworldly power that makes modern vehicles look timid by comparison. These are the machines that prove perfection is predictable, but originality is eternal. Welcome to 15 of the weirdest custom classic cars ever built. Vehicles that chose madness over mediocrity and changed automotive history forever. 1938 Phantom Corsair, the car that looked like tomorrow. In 1938, when most automobiles still wore separate fenders like Formula Tire, Rust Hines, heir to the ketchup fortune, commissioned a vehicle that looked like it had traveled backward through time from the 21st century. The Phantom Corsair wasn't just ahead of its time. It was from a different timeline entirely. Built by Maurice Schwartz at Bowman and Schwartz in Pasadena, the six-passenger streamliner eliminated every visual cue that identified a car as a car. No running board, no exposed wheels, no chrome excess, just one continuous envelope of aluminum flowing from nose to tail like frozen mercury. Underneath the science fiction body sat the advanced chassis of a Cord 810, complete with front-wheel drive and a Lycoming V8 paired to a 4-speed pre-selected transmission. But the engineering marvels lived in the details. Push-button doors, fully faired-in headlamps, and an aircraft-inspired dashboard that made conventional cars look medieval. The seating configuration, an unusual 2+2+2 arrangement, accommodated 6 adults in a cabin that felt more like a luxury aircraft than an automobile. Every curve had been obsessively streamlined, creating a drag coefficient that wouldn't be matched by production cars for decades. When the Corsair debuted, it caused a sensation. Magazines called it the car tomorrow. Hollywood came calling, and the vehicle appeared in the 1938 film The Young and Hard, cementing its status as a cultural icon. But tomorrow proved expensive. Hines planned to produce the Corsair for $12,500, more than a mansion cost in 1938. And even at that astronomical price, the business case crumbled. Tragically, Rust Hines died in a car accident before his dream could evolve beyond a single prototype. Today, the Phantom Corsair survives as a museum showpiece, a testament to what happens when unlimited resources meet unlimited imagination. It remains a car that looked like tomorrow, and still does. 1948 Tasco prototype. The aircraft on wheels. Gordon Bierig didn't just design cars. He designed rolling sculpture that happened to have engines. The man responsible for the legendary Cord 810's coffin nose had moved on by 1948, but his vision hadn't dimmed. The Tasco prototype emerged from his post-war imagination as something between a sports car and a fighter plane, proof that America's obsession with aviation hadn't ended with VJ Day. This bizarre vintage vehicle featured removable fender pods, actual modular bodywork you could attach like drop tanks on AP-51 Mustang, and a transparent aircraft canopy over the cockpit that made conventional windshields look quaint. Built on a custom chassis with early fiberglass components, the Tasco represented experimental thinking in materials and configuration. Power came from an overhead valve V8, but the real innovation lived in the details. The steering system echoed a yoke-like feel, encouraging drivers to think of themselves as pilots. Those removable fender sections weren't just styling exercises. Bierg envisioned owners customizing their car for different weather conditions or racing applications, decades before modularity became fashionable in automotive design. The public reaction mixed fascination with bewilderment. Here was a one-off prototype that looked more at home on an airfield than a highway, from a designer whose previous work had defined elegance. Critics called it too strange a production, too impractical for daily use. They were probably right. But the Tasco influenced design thinking for years, particularly in the bubble canopy trend that swept concept cars throughout the 1950s. Every time you see a wraparound windshield or a glass roof, Bierg's airplane-inspired thinking echoes forward. The single Tasco prototype survives today, displayed periodically in American collections where vintage automotive enthusiasts can marvel at a road plane that chose imagination over convention. It remains proof that the weirdest ideas often cast the longest shadows. 1955 Lincoln Futura, the car that became Batman. Some weird custom classic cars fade into footnotes. Others become immortal by transforming into something even stranger. The Lincoln Futura began life in 1955 as Ford's vision of ultimate luxury, a concept vehicle hand-built by Carrozzeria Ghia in Turin that looked like a shark mated with a jet fighter. Twin, clear canopies bubbled up from the body, like eyes on an insect. Massive double dorsal fins sliced backward with theatrical aggression. The fluorescent paint, a silver blue that seemed to glow with radioactive intensity, made the car visible from Mars. This wasn't subtle dream car design. This was automotive theater, a Motorama showstopper engineered to make crowds gasp. Underneath the wild bodywork sat conventional Lincoln running gear. Because the Futura wasn't about mechanical innovation, it was about pushing styling to science fiction extremes. The plexi bubble canopies anticipated safety concerns while creating visual drama. The sonar-themed dashboard looked like submarine controls. Every surface screamed future, a word that appeared right in the car's name with unsubtle confidence. Public reaction was massive. The Futura toured shows, appeared in films, and became synonymous with atomic age optimism. But concept cars don't last forever, and by the early 1960s, the Futura sat forgotten in a lot, its silver blue paint fading, its tomorrow becoming yesterday. Then television producer William Dozier came calling with an impossible deadline. He needed a Batmobile for a new series, and he needed it now. George Barris, the legendary customizer, saw potential in the Futura's wild bones. He chopped, extended, and transformed it, adding bat fins and red trim, turning Ford's luxury concept into pop culture immortality. The original Futura no longer exists. It became the 1966 TV Batmobile, one of the most recognizable vehicles in history. From dream car royalty to superhero legend, the Futura's legacy proves that weirdness isn't failure. Sometimes it's destiny. 1934 Bugatti Type 57 Aerolithe, the car made of lightning. Some materials whisper. Electrons screamed. When Jean Bugatti designed the Aerolithe in 1934, he chose magnesium alloy for the body, a substance so reactive, so impossibly light, that conventional welding would cause it to combust. The solution? Exposed rivets running down the spine like a prehistoric creature's backbone, joining panels that weighed almost nothing and shimmer with an unearthly luster. This wasn't just a car. It was automotive alchemy, a one-off prototype that looked like frozen lightning shaped into automotive form. Built on the early Type 57 chassis with Bugatti's magnificent inline-8 engine, the Aerolithe prioritized weight savings above all else. Those wafer-thin magnesium panels created a silhouette so low, so futuristic, that even today it looks advanced. The dorsal seam of rivets, born from material necessity, became a defining aesthetic element, turning engineering compromise into artistic statement. Every line flowed with purpose, creating forms that wouldn't look out of place in a 21st century wind tunnel despite being shaped by hand in the mid-1930s. When Bugatti unveiled the Aerolithe at shows, crowds stood stunned. Here was Art Deco taken to its logical extreme, where form and function merged into something that transcended mere transportation. But magnesium's volatility proved problematic. The fragile, reactive metal couldn't withstand the demands of regular use. The Aerolithe design lived on to the legendary Type 57 SC Atlantic models, which translated the concept into aluminum with those same iconic dorsal seams, now purely decorative rather than structural necessity. The original Aerolithe vanished, possibly scrapped for materials during wartime, possibly hidden and lost. Faithful recreations exist, and the production Atlantics have become among the most valuable automobiles ever built, selling for tens of millions. But that first magnesium dream remains lost, a car made of lightning that couldn't survive the storm of history, yet illuminated design thinking for generations. 1939 Delahaye 165 Fagoni and Falaschi, the rolling sculpture. Before World War II shattered Europe's elegant pre-war world, French coach builders created automobiles as haute couture on wheels. The 1939 Delahaye 165 body by Fagoni E.T. Falaschi represented this philosophy's absolute peak. AV 12 grand root year where beauty wasn't an accent, but the entire mission statement. This bizarre vintage vehicle stretched teardrop fenders into impossibly long curves punctuated by chrome spears that looked like jewelry scaled up for giants. Every surface had been considered, shaped, and polished until the car became sculpture that happened to move. Underneath this theatrical bodywork sat a 4.5-liter V12 engine, delivering power appropriate for a grand tour machine. Though the Delahaye 165's mission emphasized elegance over outright speed, the proportions defied conventional automotive logic. Those massive fenders should have looked absurd, yet somehow Fagoni E.T. Falaschi made them appear inevitable, as if any other shape would have been compromised. The fastback roofline flowed into a tail section that terminated with theatrical finality, creating a profile that commanded attention from any angle. This wasn't a car built for racing or economy. It was automotive theater, designed to star at exhibitions where crowds would circle it like gallery patrons studying a masterpiece. When the 165 appeared at the 1939 New York World's Fair, it represented French artistry at its finest, proof that automobiles could transcend utility and become art. Critics and enthusiasts praised it as one of the most beautiful vehicles ever created, though few could afford such splendor even before war made such extravagance impossible. The surviving example remains a museum and private collection darling, appearing at the world's most prestigious automotive exhibitions where judges score beauty over speed. The Delahaye 165 proved that sometimes weird means wonderful, that engineering can serve aesthetics, and that the strangest proportions can create the most memorable shapes. It's the rolling sculpture that refused to apologize for being excessive and changed coach building forever. 1942 L'Electrique, the electric egg. While most of the world built weapons in 1942, French industrial designer Paul Arzens built hope shaped like an egg. L'Electrique, the electric egg, emerged during wartime fuel shortages as a gentle answer to an aggressive question: what if transportation didn't require gasoline, noise, or aggression? This three-wheel microcar wrapped its occupants in a transparent plexiglass dome mounted to an aluminum hull, creating something that looked more like a terrestrial spacecraft than conventional automobile. At a time when vehicles meant military convoys and rationed fuel, Arzens built a smiling vision of peaceful mobility. The technical specifications were humble by any standard. A small electric motor drew power from a modest battery pack, delivering minimal range and speed that made walking seem competitive. The three-wheel configuration simplified construction while creating inherent instability that required cautious cornering. But practicality wasn't the point. Arzens, an artist and industrial designer, created L'Electrique as a statement about sustainable urban mobility decades before anyone used those words together. The transparent canopy made the driver visible to pedestrians, humanizing the vehicle. The ultralight construction minimized material use during wartime scarcity. Public reaction mixed bemusement with admiration. Here was an eccentric solution to real problems, though one too strange and limited for immediate adoption. L'Electrique looked like something from a gentler future, where cities prioritize efficiency over power and visibility over speed. It never entered production, remaining a one-off experiment that proved electric vehicles needn't be joyless or purely utilitarian. They could be whimsical, optimistic, and maybe even beautiful in their odd way. Today, the electric egg survives in French museum collections where it's celebrated as a beloved oddity, proof that wartime didn't kill imagination, only postponed it. Arzens' gentle bubble reminds us that the weirdest custom classics aren't always about speed or luxury. Sometimes they're about hope on three wheels. 1951 Buick LeSabre concept, Harley Earl's jet age dream. Harley Earl didn't do subtle. As head of GM styling, he transformed American automotive design into jet age fantasy, and the 1951 LeSabre concept car represented his philosophy at full throttle. Built from aluminum and magnesium with a supercharged V8 capable of running dual-fuel mixtures, the LeSabre looked like an afterburner with seats. But the truly weird innovation lived in the details: a moisture sensor that automatically closed a retractable roof when rain fell, technology decades ahead of its time hiding beneath that dramatic body. The styling announced Earl's intentions immediately. This was corporate imagination with a fighter pilot swagger. Those proto-fins at the rear foreshadowed fin wars that would dominate 1950s American design. The aircraft-inspired details weren't subtle metaphors. They were literal translations of aerospace, thinking applied to luxury automobiles. The wraparound windshield, the low stance, the aggressive intakes. Every element screamed speed even when parked. This wasn't evolution. This was revolution wearing chrome. When the LeSabre debuted at GM's Motorama shows, public reaction bordered on religious experience. Crowds surrounded the car, cameras flashed, and designers from competing companies quietly took notes. Here was proof that American automotive styling had found its post-war identity, and that identity wore a pilot's uniform. The dual-fuel capability hinted at engineering experimentation, though the real innovation lived in how Earl packaged drama into a drivable concept that actually worked. The LeSabre survived as a crown jewel in GM's heritage collection, carefully preserved as a car that set styling direction for a decade. It influenced everything from Corvettes to Cadillacs, proving that weird custom classic cars don't need to fail to matter. Sometimes they succeed so completely that their DNA spreads through an entire industry. Earl's jet age dream taught Detroit that peacetime could look as dramatic as war, and American roads would never look conservative again. 1937 Stout Scarab, the first minivan. William B. Stout thought like an airplane engineer because he was an airplane engineer. When he turned his attention to automobiles in 1937, he ignored every convention and asked a simple question: why should a car look like a car? The Stout Scarab answered by looking like nothing else: an aluminum egg of the engine mounted mid-rear, a lounge-like interior with movable seats and a table, and a monovolume shape that prioritized interior space over exterior aggression. 60 years before minivans became suburban defaults, Stout built the first one and made it weird enough to remain distinctive forever. The technical execution borrowed aircraft thinking throughout. Aluminum construction kept weight down. Independent suspension improved ride quality. The rear mid-engine layout, using a humble flathead Ford to 5/8, freed the interior from drive shaft tunnels and transmission humps, creating a flat floor where passengers could arrange seating however they wanted. Need a conference table? Install it. Prefer traditional rows? Configure accordingly. This modular interior flexibility was revolutionary thinking in an era when car seats were fixed positions, not options. Public reaction split between fascination and confusion. The Scarab's $5,000 price tag, astronomical for 1937, limited production to fewer than 10 units. Buyers who could afford such luxury wanted chrome and presence, not egg-shaped practicality. But design historians recognized the Scarab's importance immediately. Here was thinking that prioritized occupant comfort over mechanical convention, that valued interior volume over exterior styling, that chose function with such commitment that form became secondary. The surviving Scarabs live in museums where they're revered as visionary vehicles that arrived too early. Stout proved that weird doesn't mean wrong. Sometimes it means prophetic. His living room on wheels predicted the entire minivan and crossover revolution, though it took 6 decades and suburban parents for the industry to recognize his aluminum egg as genius. 1953 GM Firebird IXP 21. The jet you couldn't drive. Some concept cars suggest a future. Others demand it at gunpoint while screaming through a turbine engine. The 1953 GM Firebird IXP 21 represented corporate imagination unbound by reality's tedious restrictions like drivability or making sense. This single-seat, gas turbine-powered missile on wheels featured a bubble canopy, delta fins, and an afterburner-style tailpipe that announced its intentions. This wasn't transportation, this was spectacle. GM Engineering built a vehicle that functioned more as rolling thunder than automobile. proving that sometimes weird means deliberately, gloriously impractical. The turbine engine made conventional powertrains look medieval, but came with challenges engineers hadn't solved. Throttle lag measured in geological time, heat output that could cook bystanders, and fuel consumption that made bombers look efficient. None of this mattered. The Firebird I was pure Motorama magic, a show car built to make crowds believe jet-age promises were real. That aircraft cockpit with its fighter plane instrumentation, the experimental materials in the bodywork, the delta fin rising from the tail section, every element prioritized drama over utility. Public reaction was predictable. Jaws dropped, cameras clicked, and attendees left believing GM could build anything. The Firebird I became a star of the Motorama circuit, drawing crowds that pressed against velvet ropes to glimpse this impossible machine. Did anyone seriously think turbine-powered single-seaters would replace the Chevrolet? Of course not. But that wasn't the point. The point was proving American engineering had imagination, ambition, and the audacity to build a jet car just because they could. Today, the Firebird I survives in museum preservation, a testament to an era when corporations built dreams alongside practical products. It's pure spectacle. The jet you couldn't drive but couldn't forget, proof that the weirdest custom classics aren't always about reaching destinations. Sometimes they're about reaching for impossibility and coming close enough to matter. 1958 Plymouth Tornado by GHI. Detroit meets futurism. Some concept cars are meticulously documented. Others slip through history's fingers like automotive ghosts. The 1958 Plymouth Tornado built by Carrozzeria Ghia in Turin exists in that strange borderland between confirmed existence and whispered rumor. This one-off show coupe melded American mechanical guts with Italian styling sensibility, creating spaceship curves on Detroit hardware that somehow look more European than anything wearing Chrysler badges. The hand-formed panels created knife-edge character lines and a low roofline that defy conventional proportions, suggesting a future where borders between design philosophies dissolved. Built on Plymouth running gear, the practical foundation beneath exotic bodywork, the Tornado represented Chrysler's willingness to let Italian craftsmen interpret American automotive DNA. The result looked nothing like mainstream Plymouth products, instead channeling a streamlined aesthetic that prioritized aerodynamic forms over chrome excess. Those spaceship curves weren't accidental styling flourishes. They were deliberate attempts to create visual drama through shape alone, proving that strange old cars didn't need fins and chrome to command attention. Public reaction at automotive shows was strong. The Tornado attracted crowds and photographs, but production never materialized. Concept cars often die young, but the Tornado's fate remains particularly murky. Some sources credit examples to private European collections, but confirmations remain scarce. The car exists in that frustrating space where automotive historians know it was real but can't definitively locate survivors, making it a lost UFO in vintage automotive history. Whether hidden in European garages or lost to time, the Plymouth Tornado represents the beautiful risk of building one-off prototypes. Not every weird custom classic survives to become a museum darling. Some vanish, leaving only photographs and questions. But even as a ghost, the Tornado matters, proof that Detroit and Turin could merge minds and create something that belonged in neither place and both simultaneously. 1949 Davis Divan, The Three-Wheel Promise. Gary Davis sold dreams better than he built cars. The 1949 Davis Divan represented his grandest pitch, a three-wheeled aluminum-bodied family sports car with aircraft-style canopy, yoke-like steering, and promises of extraordinary fuel economy and speed. The promotion materials made it sound revolutionary: lightweight construction, streamlined design, room for a small family, and performance that defied its odd proportions. Investors believed him. Deposits poured in. The future looked bright for this bizarre three-wheeler that claimed to do everything conventional cars did, only cheaper and stranger. Then reality intervened. The Davis Divan single rear will create inherent stability issues that physics couldn't negotiate away. The aluminum body stayed lightweight, but production costs exceeded projections. That aircraft canopy and yoke steering created more style than substance, novelties that couldn't overcome fundamental design compromises. The promised economy and speed targets prove elusive when prototypes hit actual roads. Davis had built a vehicle that looked futuristic in photographs, but struggled with basic automotive requirements like not tipping over in corners. Public reaction moved from excitement to lawsuits. Investors who placed deposits watched as the Davis Motor Car Company collapsed under the weight of unfulfilled promises and questionable financial practices. Gary Davis faced fraud charges. The dream evaporated faster than it had materialized, leaving behind a handful of prototype vehicles and a cautionary tale about showmanship exceeding substance. The automotive press, initially enthusiastic, turned skeptical, documenting the Divan's failure as a warning about believing promises over prototypes. Today, surviving Davis Divans exist in museums as cult curiosities, rolling evidence that weird doesn't guarantee success, and promises can't replace engineering. The three-wheeled UFO taught an important lesson. Imagination needs execution, and the weirdest custom classics sometimes become weird for all the wrong reasons. The Divan sold itself too hard, delivered too little, and vanished into history as a promise that couldn't keep itself. 1960 Citroën C10 prototype, the flying saucer sedan. French automotive thinking has always operated on a different frequency, and the 1960 Citroën C10 prototype proved that strangeness runs deep in French engineering DNA. This teardrop capsule prioritized aerodynamics with almost religious fervor, creating a glassy roof vehicle that looked less like conventional transportation and more like a terrestrial spacecraft designed by rational aliens. Every surface contributed to minimal wind resistance. The frontal area shrank to almost nothing. The silhouette suggested something that should hover rather than roll, yet this bizarre vintage vehicle represented serious engineering research into fuel efficiency and streamlining. Technical details remained somewhat mysterious. The C10 existed primarily as an internal concept study with limited public showings. Power likely came from small displacement engines, possibly Citroën's flat twin configuration, though the exact specifications vary by source. What matters is the shape itself, that extreme commitment to aerodynamic efficiency that made conventional cars look like rolling bricks. The glassy canopy maximized visibility while contributing to the spacecraft aesthetic, creating an environment that felt more aviation-inspired than traditionally automotive. Public reaction stayed limited because Citroën kept the C10 mostly internal, showing it selectively to reinforce the company's reputation for futuristic thinking. This was a Motorama showstopper meant for mass marketing. It was a research exercise that became rolling sculpture, proof that Citroën's engineers thought about automotive design fundamentally differently than their global competitors. That teardrop form and space-age aesthetic felt perfectly at home in Citroën's catalog alongside other unconventional vehicles like the DS. The C10 survives in company or museum custody, a prototype that never needed production to matter. It represents rational alien thinking, practical weirdness wrapped in French charm, proving that efficiency can look exotic and that the strangest shapes sometimes make the most sense. Not every weird custom classic needs to be impractical. Sometimes weird means seeing solutions nobody else noticed. 1935 Bugatti Type 57 S Compressor du Boss CUP, the vampire Bugatti. Some cars live in shadows by choice. Others get hidden by circumstance and emerge decades later as automotive ghost stories. The 1935 Bugatti Type 57S with one-off Du Bois coupe bodywork followed the latter path, a low, brooding Art Deco masterpiece that vanished into long storage only to resurface in the 21st century as barn-find legend, built on Bugatti's lowered S chassis with that magnificent supercharged straight-eight engine. The compressor, blower added later in its life. The singular fastback represented bespoke coachwork at its finest, every line flowing with Gothic elegance that made conventional cars look cheerful by comparison. The bodywork by Carrosserie Du Bois created proportions that shouldn't work, but somehow achieved perfection, low, long, and dangerous looking in ways that suggested speed even when motionless. Unlike the production Bugattis with their established design language, the Du Bois body went its own direction, prioritizing dramatic presence over commercial appeal. This was a car built for one customer with specific tastes, and those tastes ran towards shadow and drama. The fastback roofline terminated in a tail section that looked ready to slice through the darkness. When new, Bugatti historians recognized the Du Bois coupe as singular silhouette, but the car largely disappeared from public consciousness, stored away in circumstances that remained somewhat mysterious. Decades passed. The Bugatti faded into legend, rumors of its existence debated among enthusiasts. Then it emerged from storage in the 2000s like a vampire waking after centuries of sleep, dusty, forgotten, but fundamentally unchanged. The automotive world went slightly mad. Here was a one-off coach-built Bugatti, a car from an era when such vehicles regularly vanished forever. Restoration followed, and today the vampire Bugatti appears at prestigious exhibitions where crowds marvel at a living ghost story. It proved that weird custom classics can sleep for generations and wake up valuable, that Gothic elegance never truly dies, and that sometimes the strangest cars are the ones nobody sees coming. 1957 Aurora Safety Car, the ugliest savior. Beauty and purpose rarely agree, and the 1957 Aurora Safety Car proved their relationship had broken down completely. Father Juliano, a Catholic priest with engineering ambitions, designed this fiberglass safety concept with singular focus. Protect occupants at all costs, aesthetics be damned. The result looked like someone had described a car to an alien over a bad phone connection, then built whatever the alien imagined. Odd proportions, strange angles, and a face only a safety engineer could love create a vehicle that critics mocked mercilessly while grudgingly admitting its ideas made terrible, brilliant sense. Juliano obsessed over crash survival with intensity that bordered on prophetic. The Aurora featured a padded dashboard decades before regulations required it. A roll cage structure reinforced the cabin. Panels designed to pop off during impacts rather than crushing inward. Swiveling seats that position occupants optimally for collisions. A pedestrian-friendly nose that prioritized not killing people outside the car. Every bizarre design choice served survival rather than style, creating something that looked visually bizarre but conceptually revolutionary for 1957, when safety meant don't crash rather than survive crashing. Public reaction was brutal. Automotive journalists called it the ugliest car ever built. Consumers wouldn't have bought it at any price. Yet safety advocates in hindsight recognized the Aurora as visionary, thinking decades ahead of mandatory safety regulations. Juliano proved that a priest could see automotive truths that corporations miss, that ugly doesn't mean wrong, and that sometimes the weirdest custom classics become weird because they're seeing problems nobody else admits exist. Today, the Aurora lives restored as a cult exhibit, proving beauty and purpose can divorce, and still create historically significant vehicles. It's the ugliest savior in automotive history, the car that tried to save lives before anyone asked it to, wrapped in bodywork that guaranteed nobody would listen. Father Juliano built something that looked absurd and thought brilliantly, a strange old car that mattered more than anyone appreciated in 1957. 1955 Chrysler Streamline X Gilda, the sculpture that could move. Some vehicles are cars first and art second. Gilda reversed that equation entirely. The 1955 Chrysler Streamline X, named after Rita Hayworth's film noir character, with an aesthetic borrowed from the movie poster's dramatic lines, represented pure jet-age fantasy shaped by Carrozzeria Ghia under Giovanni Savinuzzi's styling direction. This wasn't a practical concept. It was sculpture that happened to move, a wind tunnel-tested exercise in extreme proportions where fins reached absurd heights, and the tapered tail stretched into infinity. Every surface prioritized visual drama over functional necessity, creating something that looked more at home in galleries and garages. The technical specifications mattered less than the shape itself. Show car running gear provided minimal movement capability, but nobody cared about acceleration or handling. Gilda existed to prove shapes could evoke emotions, that automotive design could transcend utility and become purely aesthetic experience. Those massive fins, exaggerated beyond any production possibility, created a profile impossible to mistake for anything else. The dramatically tapered tail section stretched proportions into impossible territory. The overall form suggested motion even when completely stationary, wind tunnel testing confirming what eyes already knew. This thing was slippery as physics allowed. Public reaction at shows was immediate and overwhelming. Crowds surrounded Gilda like museum patrons studying a masterpiece, because that's exactly what it was. This bizarre vintage vehicle toured both European and American exhibitions, winning praise from critics who recognized it as art first, automobile second. The jet age aesthetic reached its absolute peak in Gilda's proportions. No production car could ever match this level of theatrical excess without crossing into self-parody. Gilda survives today, restored and exhibited internationally at the world's most prestigious automotive exhibitions, where Concours judges score it as one of the most important concept cars ever built. It proved that weird custom classics don't need practicality when they possess beauty this extreme, that sculpture and automobile can merge completely, and that sometimes the point is just being unforgettable. Gilda chose art before function and became eternal because of it. In an age before computers could simulate aerodynamics, these builders created science fiction out of steel and imagination. Some became icons that influenced generations. Others vanished into footnotes or scrapyards. But all shared one trait: the courage to be strange. They weren't built for markets or masses. They were built because someone dared ask, what if? These 15 vehicles prove that originality outlasts perfection, that imagination matters more than practicality, and that the weirdest ideas cast the longest shadows. Which of these bizarre custom classics fascinated you most? Drop a comment below and let us know. If you're hungry for more forgotten stories from automotive history's golden age, hit that subscribe button. We got plenty more strange machines to uncover.